Hi everyone, welcome to Talks at Google. Thanks so much for joining us today. It's my pleasure to welcome Sarah Robb O'Hagan to the office to talk about her new book, Extreme You, Step Up, Stand Out, Kick Ass, Repeat. The book not only inspires you to take risks and step out of the box, but is also funny, entertaining, and super interesting as she takes you through her own personal journey of success and failure and how they have got her to where she is today. Please join me in welcoming her.
Thank you. Good morning, Googlers. How is everyone? Ready to rock it out? All right. So I generally like to start my talks with just a little bit of context. Where's the crazy accent from? I am from New Zealand. Has anyone ever been there in the room? Yes, there's always one. There's two. Is it amazing? It's kind of amazing. So it is like, it was discovered in 1769 actually by Captain James Cook, who wrote in his logbook, "I believe I have found God's own." I mean, I'm not even kidding. It's the most gorgeous place on the planet. So why would I leave New Zealand, you wonder? Well, there's like 4 million people and almost 50 million sheep. Let's just start there. That is not like a joke. That is exactly what my country looks like. So as a young person growing up, you can imagine I had a lot of like, well, is this it? Like, is this my people or is there more in the world? Like, how do we go beyond? New Zealand is also a country that is very passionate about sports. I love that I've got my crew team in the back row here today. So like Americans, we're really into sport in America. Well, in New Zealand, we're a little country, but we like swing hard. In the 1984 Olympics, which most of you probably can't even remember because you weren't born, I was like a 12-year-old watching on TV as we got the most medals we've ever won in our history. And that was 12 medals. You guys, it's amazing. Like we were number one on the global per capita medals table. That's a big deal to us. But what's really cool about it is every medal that we won involved a sport where they were sitting down. Isn't that amazing? Look at the pictures, like literally. Cycling, rowing, kayaking, horse riding. I could go on. Like, we crushed it at the sports that involved. Who would have thought, right? So why am I sharing this funny story with you is because I do believe as a young person growing up, it did leave quite a profound thought with me, and that is that it takes extreme focus to achieve extraordinary results. Like those little Kiwis punching above their weight, you have to really have focus on something that is your unique specialty. And you'll see in the pictures here, I've had the great pleasure of working for some of the world's most incredible brands, sustaining amazing brands. And what they all have in common is this detailed focus on what they are, where they're going, why they're unique, and they don't get distracted as the years go by. And it's especially important when the landscape is so rapidly changing. And for me, being someone who's gone everything from Virgin Megastores, does anyone even remember Virgin Megastores, when the music industry got disrupted and that company no longer exists, through to the likes of Nike, which is driving innovation and pushing forward more than any other company in the world. The big difference is those that consistently play their own game but just stay in front and disrupt themselves before the industry does it to them. So I've had these great career experiences, and the process of writing my book led me to say, well, what does this actually mean for individuals as well and leaders? And you can see here, over the last 3 years I have interviewed 25 of some of the most profoundly successful people on the planet, because I wanted to know, just like those brands, what is it about them that uniquely enables them to stay on the top of their game? And what I did is I went to great lengths to sort of go to all walks of life. So you see some of the pictures here, everyone from Condoleezza Rice, who we all know, who's like the world's most amazing badass, through to Bodie Miller, who's a downhill skier, through to Mr. Cartoon, who's one of the world's most famous tattoo artists, Sam Cass, the White House chef. What they all have in common is this incredible ability to know their own specialties, to know what they're amazing at, to focus like those little Kiwis, and to constantly disrupt themselves. Whenever they get to mastery, push themselves to the next level. So with that said, I think about this framework that I've been developing and discovering, and it starts with you, the person, like those individuals I just talked about. What is extreme you? What is you at your most optimum potential. Like, what is the core set of skills that you have? And generally, extremers, as I call them, are not well-rounded. They're not the kinds of people that have tons of experience in a lot of places. They're probably super good at one specialty and really passionate about it, and we love them in the workplace. However, they need to be partnered with complementary people to become extreme teams. Like when we get lots of complementary skills together, and then ultimately, the extreme organization is that organization that is loaded with people with incredible skills in specialist areas, but together, they come together and focus on a really, really focused mission. So with that said, I'm going to go through 3 examples today of the kind of key tenets that I learned from all these amazing businesses and all these amazing leaders in developing the idea that was Extreme You. And the first one is what I like to call make failure your fuel. It is possibly my most favorite topic in the world. And it starts with the fact that I have had a career mainly in the sports and fitness industry. If you Googled me a couple of years ago, what you would have seen is that I was known for turning around Gatorade, a $5 billion sports drink business. I had all these things like Fast Company's most creative people in business. That looks amazing, right? But what it totally left out was the fact that in my 20s, I got fired not once, but twice, back to back. And I like to share the story because I believe in our culture today of success, whether it's lists of the 40 under 40, 30 under 30, 20 under 20, whether it's perfectly coiffed Instagram pictures, we tend to show all the amazing stuff, and we don't tend to show some of the really embarrassing, not so cool stuff. So one of the reasons I wrote this book was I felt it was important to share, particularly with young people, that you have to fail in order to know who you are and in order to succeed in the future. My example of Virgin, like I mentioned, was Virgin Megastores. I joined in the late 90s, the year Napster had come along. So let's just go there, remember that. I still remember like our big moment, it was May, and we had to like comp Ricky Martin's album sales from the year before. Like that's how awesome it was. But in the end, the company actually went under for all the reasons I said before, because they were being disrupted from outside and not taking care of themselves. But my experience was someone who'd come in from a high-flying role at Virgin Atlantic Airways. I thought I had it down. I was like rocking and rolling, not listening to anyone around me in a totally foreign business, so over my skis, so arrogant. And I got fired, not like laid off, one person fired. And let me explain to you what that feels like when you go into the office and HR is sitting there and you feel the blood rush out of your face and you get told that you have 1 week severance, they're getting rid of your green card application and your visa, and you get a one-way ticket back to New Zealand. In other words, we don't want you in our company, we don't even want you in our country. Like, that's how awesome it was. So I go through that, and then desperate times call for desperate measures. I have 3 months to stay in the country, and I end up taking a job at Atari. Does anyone in this room remember Atari? Some fun fans, I would imagine. Which was a disaster for me because I completely overlooked the fact that I cannot stand video games, never have liked them, have no interest in them, don't understand them. Within 2 years, that's another company in distress, and a bunch of people are getting laid off, and of course I'm one of them. So by this stage, I'm now in my late 20s. I've had up to 4 years of epic career failure, right? Disastrous. Like I call it fondly my canyon of career despair. It was terrible. But here's the thing. That same person that was a total flame out in these 2 environments, eventually after I leave Atari, I'm desperately trying to find the right role for me going forward. I finally land at Nike after 12 months of interviewing and trying and getting in the door. And that same loser girl suddenly becomes on the fast track, having a great career, rocking and rolling, right? And the lesson here for me was you have to experience extreme environments to understand where you suck and where you thrive. And when you get yourself onto the playing field where you thrive, it feels amazing, and you know the difference, and all your confidence comes back. And that is the importance of failure on the way to success, because quite honestly, had I not just gone through those 2 back-to-back firings, I don't think I would have had the humility coming in the door to succeed at Nike. I mean, literally, I walk in the door and I'm like, please don't fire me. Please don't fire me. I will do anything to do well here. And one of the great athletes that I had the pleasure of working with when I was at Nike was Bodie Miller. Do you guys know Bodie? He's awesome, by the way. I mean, the best skier in the world to watch, because there is nothing between disqualified and gold. Like, it's just the way he rolls. But I really got to know him around the 2006 Torino Olympics, and he's extraordinary when you talk to him about failure, because he talked about as a child when he was learning to ski in New Hampshire, he physically was smaller than the other skiers, so he kept coming in like 30th, 40th, like certainly not podium potential, right? And the trainers kept saying to all of them, well, you've just got to kind of push yourself incrementally. That was the way they were training skiers in those days. And he's like, well, that ain't working for me, clearly. So finally, he's like, I got to go my own way and figure this out. And he starts skiing in practice, like balls to the wall. If anyone's watched this guy ski, there is no like holding back. And he would crash a lot, and it was painful. But as he said, that was pushing him to the edge of his own boundaries, his edge of his comfort level, and teaching him to be able to eventually recover in those crashes to get to the next level. So on race day, when the other guys suddenly go full steam ahead, they're crashing, he actually now can push to a higher level because he's taught himself through the very act of crashing and failing and pain to get to the next level. So a great metaphor for all of us as we think about our own careers. All right, so that's making failure your fuel. Number 2 I like to talk about is playing your specialist game. What does that mean for you personally? So I came upon this idea from studying these great brands and businesses that I've been lucky enough to be involved with. And I'll pick out a few here just to share with you. So Virgin Atlantic Airways, has anyone flown Virgin? Is it not awesome? You get your hair done at the clubhouse. It's amazing. But Virgin's super interesting to me because having spent about 8 years in the airline industry, most of you would know if you fly United or American, especially this week, but their target audience is generally human beings with arms and legs. Right, you know what I'm saying? Whereas Virgin, when they came into the business, they're like, we're not going after everyone. We're going to have this really defined position. And we're going to focus on people who are into culture and technology and entertainment and fashion. Everything was built around that positioning. And as a result, they've built this incredible position as an airline. Like, they think of the travel experience, I think, more as entertainment than travel. I mean, they even got to the point where they were able to sort of be an arbiter of great taste of movies in flight because they thought about it that way. Likewise, Strava. Do I have any Strava users in the room? Can't believe that. We've got to get you out onto your bikes, guys. Strava is the social network for athletes that they're based out in Silicon Valley. And what they do is obviously track runners, cycling, all your sort of fitness activities. But as the founder said to me when I interviewed them for my book, like at the time they were born, the Fitbit market was what everyone was going after because it's big and it's massive. And they're like, well, we could have done that, but then we would have been number 10 in a giant market instead of they just went after cyclists and only cyclists, and they were number 1 for this really small group. And from there, they've managed to push out because they're going after very, very passionate athletes. And then lastly, the dry bar. Ladies in this room nodding. The guys right now are going, WTF, what is dry bar? They are, I could tell. Dry bar is an extraordinary story. I love it. I interviewed Ali, the founder, for my book. Basically, for many years, hairdressing was, certainly on the women's side, you go to a hairdresser and anything you want to get done, you get done. So cuts, colors, get your hair blown out, any of the above. Well, Ali, who founded the Dry Bar, was like, I really don't want to do all of that stuff. I'm just really good at blowing out hair because I've loved doing it since I was a child. And I want to create an entire concept just around that one thing. Now, most people would say, how the hell are you going to build a business, right, around that one thing when women need all these other things done from a beauty standpoint as well? But she's like, I'm going to be better than anyone at doing this one thing. Sure enough, Dry Bar is now coming close to a $100 million top-line business based on the fact that she's created an entire category out of this one thing, because Women, we didn't used to rock along and spend $65 for a blowout once or twice a week because the category didn't exist. She's now created it, and there's many, obviously, people following her. And she gets so many people saying, well, why don't you add, makeup or nails or all the other things that women would want? And she's like, because that would take away my focus from what I'm really, really good at, and I want to be the best at this one thing. And it's such a great lesson, because when you take all of those brand lessons and then think about yourself as an individual, how do you think about yourself being positioned like a brand would be? How do you think about your career in terms of imagining that you are that product in the marketplace that you're trying to attract people to come buy? Do you feel, just like those three examples, that you are super uniquely differentiated? Do you feel like the airline example, that you're just trying to be all things to all people, or do you have your one unique thing? Do you feel like Ali, that you have that specialty that you really are better at than anyone else? Because I do believe when you have that and you become super world class, that is what propels your career forward. So in my example, I actually spent most of my life being really, really, really average. So I'm talking really wanted to be a world-class Olympic medal-winning athlete, never made the A team in any sport that I participated in at all. Really wanted to be a world-famous singer or actress, never got picked for solos. Actually, when we did Grease at my high school, I didn't even make the Pink Ladies. I was that section that doesn't go on the stage, clearly just not cut out to be really amazing in any of those things. However, who would have thought? I didn't know 15, 20 years later, when I finally had gone through all these trials and tribulations, that what I actually was developing was this incredibly competitive mindset. I'm probably the most competitive human being in the room right now, combined with a very creative brain developed through tons and tons of music, combined with years of adventuring in the travel industry, which all comes together to make me uniquely good at innovation in the sports and fitness industry. Who would have thought? I didn't even know that was a career, but when I pulled those things together, that's where I suddenly found, wait, I'm not getting fired anymore. I've pulled it all together. And it's interesting for all of you to understand, what is that for you? Because when you find it, when you know it, when opportunity knocks, boy, you have to knock down the door. And in my case, I actually, about 6 months ago, was not working, not looking for a job, because I was working on the launch of this book, and along comes an opportunity with Flywheel Sports. And I don't know if you guys are familiar with it. I'll quickly tell you a little bit about Flywheel. But it's unique because it's not just playing in the sports and fitness industry. It's actually way into the specialty that I happen to be uniquely good at and passionate about. So if you think about the fitness industry right now, and this may be going on in many industries around the world, we are moving fast from one size fits all to specialist categories. This is really interesting. Like back in the 90s, if you think about retail, we used to go to the department store, and then we started going to boutique retail. The same thing is happening in fitness. So you see all these little boutiques popping up. I'm sure some of you in the room are attending them, whether it's cycling, little running boutiques, boot camp, like Barry's boot camp, if anyone's attended that, Zumba from a dance standpoint, yoga, all these little boutiques. Now those feel very specialist, but interestingly, even within the cycling category, you would think that in itself is a specialty, but actually there's 3 different kinds of approach to cycling as a category. So if you look at the kinds of people that are attracted into the boutique cycling world, you have some that for whom it's a really social experience. The number one reason they're coming is to be social and hang out with their friends. You have others, like my friend in the middle of the room here who attends Flywheel, who probably were playing sports in high school. They're probably a little bit competitive. Would I guess at that just a little bit? And they come for performance because they're trying to push their athletic performance to the next level. And then lastly, we have people for whom routine is what gets them in the door to a fitness offering, because they don't love it, it's not their lifestyle, but they know they have to do it. So they're just looking for what is the thing that is most convenient to where I live. 3 different people with 3 completely different motivations around which to build a cycling business. So the notion here is to be spectacular for a few instead of being average for many. I love this chart. You will all be able to find yourselves on this chart. This is the US population and everybody's attitudes to physical activity and fitness. So I will walk you through it. To your right is 30% of the population simply inactive, totally don't work out at all. They exist. They're hard for me to understand, but they exist. Then we have 18%, which are what we call chore exercises, for whom they really don't like fitness. The doctor told them to do it. Like, it's not fun at all, but they do get out and push themselves. Then you have hard workers, physical laborers, obviously, and then we get into the more active. So the social group I mentioned before, for whom it's a really social activity that they want to get out there. And then the routines, as I mentioned, and then these last two groups, passionate exercises and competitive athletes. Now, competitive athletes, 15% of this population intellectually type as a competitive athlete. That means you cannot let your kids win at Monopoly. That means wherever you are, if you're on a treadmill next to someone, you are aware of their numbers and you are trying to go faster than them, you cannot help yourself. That is what a competitive athlete is. And Flywheel has completely attracted that one tiny segment because everything about our offering, we have technology so you can track your performance, compete with others in the room, compete with yourself. And that is where we focus all our energy. We don't try and go after all of it, we go after just one. And I do believe as a business that makes us stronger, and certainly as a leader, I'm with my people, so I feel very comfortable intuitively with the decisions that I'm trying to make. Okay, that was your specialist game. So now lastly, I'm going to talk about breaking yourself to make yourself, which is an important lesson that I learned, particularly from the extremers I interviewed, that you can never get complacent. So firstly, that means breaking yourself as a leader. And I do believe, having gone through the experience of being fired a couple times, it really sucks when it's done to you. It's a whole lot better to do it to yourself. And that means really recognizing, when are you in your comfort zone? When have you been doing the same thing for a while? You've achieved mastery, you feel amazing. When is that time to push to a different place and get uncomfortable? Now, in my case, I actually quit my job a year ago to do just that, because I was like, I knew I wasn't personally growing. It was the scariest thing I've ever done in my life, but my God, it's like I'd rather that than I didn't do it. A few years went by and I suddenly wasn't keeping up and I got laid off again, right? So what does that mean for you? Where is that moment in your career where you have to really push outside? And it involves challenging your most stubborn beliefs. I really have found from a lot of the research I've done that we do tend to, in our minds, get these kind of beliefs early on in our career that we're not good at certain things, that we are either an analytical person or a creative person, or whatever the category might be. And we tend to often, like, those become our blind spots and we just don't kind of want to deal with them. But actually, you should deal with them, and it's okay. That's breaking yourself down to make yourself. Like, what is it that you are sort of avoiding in your job? It isn't an area of decision-making strength for you. Can you go and take an out-of-work class on it to really push yourself to the next level? Because that is the kind of thing that will feel uncomfortable, but it will certainly get you there. And then break yourself as a business. So you've got to think, as a leader, it is your responsibility to constantly get outside your comfort zone and learn new things, but you also have to think as a business. What does that mean organizationally? I had the great experience of working at Nike and then leaving at around the time when the whole company was reorientating itself in terms of how they work together, going from footwear, apparel, and equipment to categories, soccer, running, etc. And what that caused was all of the employees to move into a different place of how they were interacting with different people to innovate, which was actually incredibly uncomfortable, but obviously leads to new thinking and new innovation. So what does that mean for your teams? Can you get them into different train tracks in order to create new innovation? And inspiration. It's so important, I believe, to look outside your category to get inspiration for what you may do going forward. If I think about Strava, like, if we were just to stay in category, we'd be looking at LinkedIn, at Facebook, at all of the obvious social networking players and say, well, let's do the same thing as them. But guess what? Strava is probably possibly one of the only Silicon Valley brands that people tattoo on their ankles because they are so passionate about it. So we need to look at the likes of Harley Davidson for inspiration, not those other brands. Or in terms of an ad marketplace, we're more relevant to look at the local cycling shop and how they are curating products for their passionate riders than necessary regular online ad marketplace. So thinking about breaking yourself down and getting inspiration from other places. And then lastly, apologies for putting that Disney song into your heads. It's going to stay there now. Let it go. And what I mean by this is breaking yourself down by definition means letting go of things that are comfortable to you. And it's not going to feel good, but what happens on the other side is always profound amounts of growth. I think about whether that means relocating to a different city because you got a job opportunity, whether it means moving into a different department that you're uncomfortable with. Always you have to let go of something that was comfortable to get there, but always, once you're through it, it's incredibly empowering in terms of how you grow. And I would say from all of the people I interviewed for my book, this was the one thing that really blew me away the most, was that these were like massively accomplished people at the top of their game, yet so willing to be humble and take a step back and say, I'm going to start over in something because I want to learn more, which is a hard thing to do when you're already at the top of your game. So it is about letting go. And that's my 3 lessons for the day. So making failure your fuel, knowing what your specialist game is, and then lastly, break yourself to make yourself, to really push yourself to the next level. And so with that, I think we have time for questions, I believe. Oh, don't be shy. Hi there.
Hey. So you started the talk about how in New Zealand there's a big focus on exercise and outdoor activity. So do you think that maybe what didn't go well at Atari and some of the others were that even just the content of the job, like you had to work at a company where you had core values or passions?
Definitely, yeah. I think passions and understanding, because you're 100% right. Like, I can still remember being in this office in Santa Monica, this is at Atari, with a ton of the programming guys who would literally, they had zero interest in going outside into any part of the universe other than working together. And I was just like, how is that possible? It's sunny outside. We should all be going for a run. You know, it's like, it just was a total disconnect. And I don't judge that group of people. That's their lifestyle, but I don't understand it. I didn't have a connection to it. So I think it's important to not only have a passion for it, but when you do, you have a lot more just sheer confidence to make decisions and take risks. So in the case of video games, you know, you're faced with, should I do this or should I do that in picking which title we're going to get behind for the Christmas season? I don't know, because I'm not that player. Yet when I'm in suddenly Nike, it's like asking me questions about how an athlete's going to respond to something. I'm like, I got this because I lived it. I know it. So I do think it is about the content, but also your own just drive and passion to get behind it, for sure.
Well, thank you very much for your talk. I love the point about really knowing what you're great at and like focusing and doubling down on that. And I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit more about, do you think about that as like a functional expertise, an industry expertise type of organization to be a part of? Because I think what's interesting is you did many different things at different places. So kind of what's the common thread between, knowing what you're really good at?
And what's the common thread between airlines, music, video games, and sports, you know? Because I think that is a great question. And one of the things that I write about in the book is that I believe that the system is designed to make you fit in. I think for most of us, whether it's in high school, you know how we all kind of got labeled as you're either super smart or a jock or, and likewise, you get your first job. And I do think your first job, like recruiters are typically going to want to keep you in the same place. Like I remember I was in the airlines for 6 years and all I wanted to do was work for Nike. Like in my head, I'm a marketing person in a brand. Doesn't matter what category it is. But the recruiters were like, you're an airline person. And I'm like, do I look like I sniff jet fuel? Like, no, I'm not. I mean, you know what I mean? And so I do believe that you are the only one that can navigate yourself out of those verticals that people will put you into, and you have to do it. And then the question is, you asked, is it industry or functional? I actually think it's a process of self-discovery to figure out what it is for you. It might be that you're just bang on in the right industry and that's exactly where you should be, or, as I found actually with a lot of the people I interviewed, many of them didn't figure out where their place was to sort of land until well into their 30s. And even though you might go, well, did that mean the first 10 years was wasted? No. Like in every instance, it was kind of taking an expertise from here and connecting it over here. Great example is one of my favorite stories in the book was a woman who had done her MBA. She was consulting and in the music industry. And so she was doing marketing, representing Gwen Stefani, like at the top of her game, right? Yet deep down inside, she was a singer. And she's like, I'm really like miserable because I'm marketing all these other people and I'm not, you know, going back to what I did as a child. So she goes and basically, long story short, studies her singing again and ends up coming back and ends up singing at the Oscars when Slumdog Millionaire was nominated. It's a great story, which leads her into, okay, now I'm going to be a full-time artist. And who would have thought all that business experience enabled her to create, she's now created her own brand, her own, you know. So it does come together. And I think it's just about having the willingness to pursue new experiences, even if it means it feels like you're starting over, because you're not. You're going to be adding it to what you already had. Definitely.
Thank you so much. Two questions. One, I'm curious what your sport was or is, in addition to spinning. And then second, I thought the breakdown of competitive, social, and convenience was really interesting.
Yeah.
And from the perspective of Flywheel, competitive definitely makes sense with the spinning part of it. How does bar fit into that?
Yeah.
Because if you're going for a specialization of competition, that to me doesn't quite.
Yeah, they're very different for sure. So I would say, so at Flywheel, we have the secondary offering called Fly Bar, which is a bar workout for anyone who knows what that is. It doesn't feel like it's the right complement because it feels like it would be a different type of consumer, but it is precision training. And what we find is the people who are doing Flywheel, that's doing a lot of cardio for them, but they also need to complement that. And our bar program is not the easiest one in the market by any stretch. And so I think it really appeals to that person who's like, okay, I'm in, I'm going to go and really feel it today, you know. So it does actually end up connecting because of the type of programming that it is. And then to answer your question, tried field hockey, failed, tried tennis, failed, skiing, failed, water skiing, failed, sailing, all of the above. But now I do a lot of Flywheel, obviously, and running. And I do Tough Mudders. Anyone in this room done Tough Mudder? One of the great stories in the book, by the way, is Will, the founder of Tough Mudder, because that's a great example to your question of, you know, his parents are like, can't you just go be a consultant? And he's like, no, I want to electrocute people for fun, you know? It's like, it didn't sound like it was going to be a huge success, and it's now, I believe they had something like 3 million people have taken these things globally. I mean, it's off the chart success story. But a great example of, he had taken all these weird experiences. He worked in the counterterrorism unit. He went to Harvard Business School, like all these crazy things to create this, what, like, sort of unheard of concept, so, for sure.
Hi. So one thing that I really like about Flywheel, and I think a lot of other people do, is like how it's like kind of on the forefront of workout technology and like how you can learn so much more about yourself. So my question for you is kind of like, what technology is coming next for Flywheel, and like where are you guys going to take it in, say, 5 years?
Oh, it's coming. So yeah, it's a great question, because Flywheel actually pioneered the technology on the bike. So for anyone who has been in the world of fitness for years, spinning was created in the 90s, like spinning, i.e. indoor cycling. But for many years, you could be that person in the back of a dark room when they said turn up the resistance, and you're sort of kind of pretending and not really. And what Flywheel did was add technology to the bike so that when you were riding, the instructor would say, I want your resistance to be here, and I want you to be hitting this on the RPMs, which is holding you very, very accountable, as you know. And what's neat about that, I think, is that people can then hold themselves accountable over a long period of time to how they're doing. So now, I do believe, and just with the team that we are working with at Flywheel, we all believe that the future of fitness is accountability. I think we're going to see this more and more and more across every category, where people, they want to know the output of that particular piece of effort compared to anything else that they were doing. It's not a perfect science yet, because we can't track things like bar in the same way that we can a cycling workout, but I believe that's where all of our effort needs to go. I also believe that the fitness industry, and as you guys know, we have the quantified self, we got a little bit too carried away with tracking the data as opposed to giving insights off the data, like, going from sort of numbers to knowledge, if you will. And I do think that's also where the future is. Like, how do we use that data to prod you, to push you, to get you to go to the next level? So we definitely have a lot of things coming. There's a big announcement actually coming in 3 weeks, so watch the space. But very much, we believe that technology and accountability is at the core of where fitness is going, for sure.
Okay, so I love your message of extreme mastery and focus. I was also interested, though, when you talked about challenging yourself, and if you're a creative person, try to be more analytical. So how do you balance the two, and how do you decide when do you just focus on mastery versus challenging yourself to something you're not good at?
So I'll give you a personal example, and because I think all of us, when we play to our extreme strengths, you just you go to a different level of performance. And for me, innovation, creativity, all these things have always been like that I can do easily. Then I find myself president of a $5 billion business that's needing to be turned around. And by the way, when I was 20, I failed stage 1 accounting. And so in my head, had my entire career told myself, I suck, I can't do this, avoided it, And finally, I was in a job where you can't hide anymore. And so I actually eventually put my hand up to my boss and I said, this is an issue. I ended up going down the street actually to Harvard Remedial Finance, which was awesome for so many reasons. But here's the thing, I will never be like a CFO, but what I did come back with was actually a real passion for it. I really enjoyed it and loved it. And it is just a compliment so that I have a better view that I can balance my strengths with. So that's one example where I think you need to make sure you're not just ignoring the blind spots. That said, I also know I will never, in any role, not surround myself with a really amazing CFO, because that's not ever going to be my biggest strength. So it's about knowing kind of how to surround yourself with the opposite skills, as well as kind of just shoring up your knowledge to make sure it's not a blind spot, is what I would say.
Hi, thanks so
Hi.
much for coming. So a lot of us work at, a very large company or work with very large companies where, the break yourself to make yourself is more challenging,
Definitely.
And so when you're working in one of those larger cultures that has a lot of inertia to not change or not break their own organization, what advice do you have for staying true to your own individual and then also impacting a potential break in that own organization and leading that yourself?
Yeah. I mean, one of my favorite chapters in the book actually is what I call Change the Game. And it's my personal experience of actually being at Gatorade, which PepsiCo, you may work with, some of you, is a giant company within which, Gatorade was one $5 billion piece. And it required, this was a business that after the recession, was a $5 billion top line that lost $500 million off the top line in 1 year. It was huge, right? And so small incremental change clearly wasn't going to do it. Yet, to move everyone along, everything that we were needing to do to fix the business went totally counter to what had worked for a really long time. And so I remember along the way having, and there's a lot of dramatic moments in the story where, you know, we thought we were heading the right direction and the business didn't start turning and everyone's like questioning, have I totally screwed up the business? You know, all of the above. But I do believe, like in that case, I had two things going for me. One was that by now I have developed this real specialty of understanding athletes, innovation in that space, and I knew it better than anyone in terms of the broader peer group because it was where I'd grown up. And secondly, I'd been fired twice in my 20s. So every step of the way, I remember saying to myself, to the point of inertia, if I play on the defense, we're not going to win, and I am going to get fired. If I play on the offense, there's a good chance we'll win, and there's also a decent chance I'll get fired, but that's okay, because I've been there before, and I'd rather go down trying to do what I did know how to do best. And I do believe for all of us, like we get into these situations, particularly in big companies, and particularly in times like the recession, where the fear kicks in, and everyone's like, but the boss said they wanted blah, blah, and this is what I've been told to do, but the boss doesn't want you to please them, they want you to drive results. And I think as long as you can frame what you're doing around, I know this doesn't feel right, but here's the line from A to B, and stay with it, and like go with all your specialty skills. That's the other thing I really believe in. Like you will have so much more conviction if you come from a place that's your own personal expertise. And you kind of have no choice but to go against the inertia, because in the end, what happens if you don't? So I love that question, by the way.
Thank you.
One more question if no one else is in line. When it comes to the space that you're in, sort of fitness, sports in general, is there a trend that you sort of see coming up behind you that you're like, that's sort of interesting, I wonder where that goes, whether it's in the breakdown of the 3 different kind of spaces or a new kind of fitness, or sort of what are you seeing out of the corner of your eye?
It's a great question. I definitely believe that the boutique specializing phenomenon is at the very beginning of where it's going. Boutique fitness has grown 400% in the last 4 years, and big box gyms have stayed flat. So, and what's interesting is that people are coming into the boutique category. Some of it's, a little bit of it is coming from big full service gyms. A lot of it's people coming in to fitness for the first time. It's creating a lot of energy in the category. I mean, health and wellness is in a great place, right? But I believe with boutique, we're still at the very beginning, because it's nobody's really blown up and scaled yet the way if you go back to retail in the 90s, like some of those boutique brands really took it to the next level. And I believe what I'm seeing at least is there's a lot of people coming into the fitness space right now, whether it's sophisticated investors, leaders, whatever. I believe it's all going to start going upwards and scaling in a big way. I also think that technology is going to be a huge driver, and omni-channel experiences. I think that's going to be so that you can be a part of the Flywheel community and you can participate in it wherever you may be around the world. I think that's a big piece of where we're going. That said, I do think that the in-person experience is not going away. And what I mean by that is if you look across retail right now, definitely retail in general is suffering because everything's moving to e-commerce, but look at what's booming. It's things like theme parks, restaurants, fitness, because I believe humans are craving time with other humans, and that's what those kind of businesses are bringing, is experiences together. So I think that's not going to go away. In fact, I think there's a lot more opportunity right there.
Who were your favorite 2 subjects that you interviewed for the book, and for any kind of quirky, different reason than people might imagine?
You're so funny. I can't. It's like picking one of my children. Yeah. No, I did. So I will say I'll pick 2 interesting subjects. Firstly, I will start by saying there's an amazing Googler in the book, Dan Kieseling, if anyone knows, who now works in Jigsaw. So he's a fan favorite. You can find him. But I would say probably the unexpected ones that really blew me away were Mr. Cartoon, the tattoo artist, was just phenomenal in terms of where he came from, where he got to, how he just had this incredible ability to get uncomfortable and keep learning. I mean, and some of his one-liners were just awesome. I really, really loved him. And then there's a personal story, actually, a connection to me, my sister-in-law, and it's an incredible story of overcoming profound mental health issues to become really quite successful on the global stage. And so different to anything else in the book, but so incredibly inspiring. But they're all amazing. They were great stories, definitely.
How do you think about the competition? Like, let's use SoulCycle. Obviously, they're, according to your categories, they're in maybe a different one, but how much do you as the CEO pay attention to them and without getting too paranoid or too distracted, but still make sure that you know what you're up against if they're your top competitor?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I'm going to say something that will probably sound surprising, but I love SoulCycle, and I believe that when they do well, the category does well, we all do well. Same with Peloton. Like, I actually believe all of us are bringing tons of energy and all the boats are rising. So I think, and what's really interesting is they are very different consumers, people coming for very different reasons. So I don't spend a lot of time thinking about them because I do spend a lot of time thinking about our core consumer who's looking for something quite different. And I would say I personally learned a lot from working at a company like Virgin or Nike, where they never thought about the competition and only played their own game, compared to the soda wars, Coke and Pepsi, Powerade, Gatorade, where it's a completely different mindset, and that can drag you into different places that aren't necessarily right for your consumer. So I think I came away with that going, stay focused. Definitely.
So thank you so much for coming. I'm a Flywheel devotee, so I'm so excited to see you here. And for those who haven't tried it, we have a great Googler discount. So
yes,
try it out.
Definitely do. Yeah.
In the vein of, I know you had mentioned that boutique fitness is sort of just starting and it's going to explode. What do you foresee as one of the biggest challenges facing Flywheel in the coming years?
I would say staying focused, actually, because I do think that there is a ton of excitement around the fitness category in general. I also think daily there's new technology and innovation that people knocking down our door wanting to suggest we do this, that, and the other. And I personally have found, because I have not grown up in a technology company like you all, as a CEO, it's hard to sort the real ideas from the many things that are just going to fall by the wayside, and not get distracted by the wrong ones. So I actually think the opportunity is so ripe for us, but we've got to place the right bets and focus on them and not get too spread too thin, I would say.
Thanks. With your focus and leadership on technology and accountability in the fitness space, are you all thinking about integrating fitness data with larger healthcare data, and how is that materializing?
Yes, we're at the very beginning of being able to think about it because we're still a very young company, but for sure, I think that's what we all need to do. That's what our consumers want us to do, is help them get a more holistic picture. So absolutely. Definitely.
Hi. You mentioned a lot about failing early and failing fast. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about also during the times when you have failed, how did you go about picking yourself back up?
Yeah.
What are different support networks you had to allow that introspection and get yourself to be propelled up for that post growth?
Yeah. So let's talk about failing fast for a second, and failing hard. Maybe I'll use that term. Because fail fast is a big idea that thankfully you guys have brought to the world in general, in terms of, as we are in business and thinking about innovation, trying, experimenting, iterating, rolling, moving. And we all have to be better at doing that. That is different to failure that really deeply impacts you and teaches you and actually takes you personally to another level. And that is one of the reasons I went to great lengths to just put it all out there. And by the way, I'm not the only one. Some of the other stories in my book, I said to everyone when I interviewed them, I don't want the great surface amazingness. I want, tell me how it felt. And Condoleezza Rice making the decision, the extraordinarily tough decision to give up on her dream of being a concert pianist and take it, tell me what that feels like. But what I would say is, you have to, like I actually break down in the book the real process of how you should go through it, because everyone says to me, how do you go into an interview after you've just been fired twice? Which is a good question. But you have to, I believe, really feel it and process it. And if you've ever had a failure, I know in my case, I spent the first at least month telling everyone around me that it was their fault. Like, it must have been the sucky industry, the leadership, whatever. And everyone you tell that to, you can sort of see in their eyes that they don't really believe you, and that's because you don't really believe you. And then you have to just sit there and go, okay, this hurts, I'm gonna own it. But the minute you actually take ownership for it and man up and say it to someone, like in a job interview saying, I got fired because I did this, which means I will never make that mistake again, it's so empowering because you own it. You're in control of it from then on. So I do think we all tend to, it's human nature to want to cover up fails because you kind of think it's a bad thing. But when you do, it's like this scary thing that's always chasing you through life, and then maybe it's going to catch up and someone's going to find out about it one day. It's better just to feel it, own it. And then, by the way, you do get great growth, and that's what you did it for, right? I always tell people, don't fail if you're not going to get the output on the other side. For sure. All right, I think my little counter clock is about to run out. So thank you very much. It's been really fun. Great questions. Thanks a lot.